What is up, everybody? It is Dr. Vibe, the host and producer of the Dr. Vibe Show, saying you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles and your solution for someone's problem. As always, if you want to chime in during our conversation live, you can catch us at DRVIBESHOW. Also, you can catch me hosting the Good Men Project show once a month at the Good Men Project, one of the most viewed sites in the world for men. I'm also co-producing that project with Marie Roker Jones. I'm also co-hosting with Marie Roker Jones, Man That You Want to Be Google Hangouts. And you can catch also selected shows of the Dr. Vibe Show at the Good Men Project and also at the Black Life Coaches Facebook fan page, the #1 resource for Black Life coaches in the world. Well, we have a long-distance friend returning back to the Dr. Vibe Show tonight, live from Melbourne, Australia. We have Dr. Bill Johnson. He's a clinical psychologist licensed to practice in the United States and Australia. He currently works as a psychologist in private practice in Melbourne, Australia. He is an expert in men and masculinity, couples counseling, and also work with adolescent males. He has a weekly column at the Good Men Project, and also does a lot of exploring in regards to mental health, brotherhood, sexuality, gender dynamics, and romantic relationships. He is currently working on a nonfiction book on black male sexuality and a novel on interracial relationships. Welcome to our show, live from the future, as we like to say, Dr. Bill Johnson. How are you, Dr. Bill?
Doing great. It's a pleasure to chat with you once again, Dr. Vibe. Thanks for having me on.
Well, and let's get it right. Dr. Bill is an official clinical doctor. I am not an official doctor. That's my pseudonym. So if you want the real medical advice, go to Australia. Don't come to me in this case. Dr.
You
Bill,
can always come to me, that's for sure. But look, I don't want you to sell yourself too short here, Dr. Vibe. This is the I go to when I need advice as well. So he's a good resource if you need some feedback, no doubt.
I received that. Well, Dr. Bill, it's been a while, or we like to say from where both of us are from, it's been a minute since you've been on our show. What have you been up to?
Been a long time, man. What it's been, maybe a year and a half, or a little bit more than that, possibly.
Absolutely.
One of the last discussions was.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, I think one of the last discussions you and I had was around racism generally, and racism especially here in Australia. There were a few going on that warrant talking about that. It was contextually significant. Well, it always is, frankly. And by the way, happy to talk about racism today or any day. What have I been doing? Same thing that I was doing before. Working quite a bit, still working on that book. I put it down for a minute to focus on daily practice, but doing really well, man. Feeling really blessed.
Excellent. Well, don't leave that book out. We want to see it published.
You know what? I take that in. Need that feedback. I know you keep me inspired. You promote motivation, so it's good to hear that. And part of it was my work, the clinical work I do, does a lot to inform the kinds that I write about. So it's been really nice to put it down for a second, deepen my understanding of masculinity, both clinically and theoretically. And now I'm about ready to go back to it and get it completed. And let me tell you, soon as I can come back on Dr. Vibe's show and have a discussion about it.
Excellent. Well, you know what? I believe that many great ideas have a birth, death, and resurrection. So I'm speaking that you're in the resurrection phase in regards to your book.
That's it. I like that. I like how you, as we say, where I come from, St. Louis. I like it. I like where you're coming from with that.
All right, good stuff. Well, today,
because I live in Australia, let me tell you, it's not too often that I can just go freestyle with some slang. Or, look, I'll try to make sure that my words are understood by the general public. But then during this discussion, I might just go, full out St. Louis style slang, just because I know that Dr. Vibe is feeling me. So
Ab- Absolutely. Well, you know what? One of the most important things I want anyone on the show to be is be yourself.
well, that's it.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what I tell you, born and raised in what's that?
No, I'm just saying that, and that's one of the main reasons why I provide this platform is for people to be themselves.
That's it.
Excellent. Well, today you wanted to share about masculinity and mental health, and why did you want to talk or share about this subject?
This is a topic that doesn't receive enough uh, publicity, and that can be very precarious. And why is that? It's because 80% of completed suicides in Australia, but these numbers existed in the U.S. Nearly 80% of completed suicides are done by men. 80% of men who would qualify for mental health diagnosis don't receive mental health treatment. So, although on one hand we're overwhelmingly more than likely to harm ourselves, to kill ourselves, we're overwhelmingly least likely out of the genders to mental health treatment. So this is another topic where anytime is the right time to talk about it, nothing said about it, and I wanted to add my voice, my feedback to the right now scarce but still growing, calling for more discussion, more analysis, more exploration on men and mental health.
That is quite an impacting statistic you gave in regards to the 80% of men, and probably it's worldwide, who need treatment for mental health don't receive it. Why is it such a high percentage in your opinion?
Well, look, let me say that that's doesn't surprise me, and it's not just in my. And this is research done by Black Dog Institute here in Australia. I would guess that those numbers, and I've not seen the research, but I would guess those numbers would go even higher if we were to particularly look at the percent of color who receive treatment. My guess would be the numbers of men of color who will qualify for psychological diagnosis don't receive treatment, and I would say the probably, this is a guess, in the high 80s to low 90s. So I would agree with you that this is more than just an Australia phenomenon, that this goes across cultures, goes countries. This is an international phenomenon. And look, this is another I wanted to talk to you about this. You know, my own experience in this, and I talk quite openly about this. Certainly not ashamed to confront the stigma that often impacts our decision to seek treatment by talking about my own experience in struggling with depression years ago. One thing I remember, and a story that I've never shared, so this is an exclusive here, sharing it on the Dr. Vibe show, that years ago, when I realized, oh my goodness, I think I'm experiencing something more than general stress. This feels like depression. One of the first things I did was I went to my GP, and I talked to the doctor, and I thought, okay, I'll talk to the GP, and either I'll get a referral to see a psychologist, or the GP will suggest medication to the office. And I got to be honest, I'm talking to him in probably the same tone, demeanor, probably, that I'm talking to you right now. So I go in there, hey, look, been worried about myself. I've been feeling down lately. What do you think I should do about that, basically? And being a psychologist, and that they're the gate in Australia, they're the gatekeepers to mental health services, right? And the doctor was, look, do you He said, "Do you have a girlfriend?" I said, "No, I'm not in a relationship." And he was like, "All right, well, look, I don't think the problem is a big deal. You probably just need to, get you a girlfriend. Matter of fact, you have kids." I'm like, "No, you ever been married?" He said, "No." He said, "Yeah, you look, get your wife, and life will be okay." And I'm like, "Okay, well, this is a bit unique to hear this feedback." So I left the office and I thought to myself, all right, about a month later, very little had changed. I'm still kind of struggling with things. And so I thought, I'm going to go to a different doctor this time. And I'm going to be very, and I'm going to say, listen, I'm not doing well. And I know enough about depression, you know, to know the severity of it and when it's just kind of the daily stressors or adjustment issues, things are more serious. And so I go to a different doctor, and he basically said, "Listen, you're a psychologist. You know how this thing works. I think you'll be fine within a two." But this time I'm thinking, "No, I need to get my point across." I said, "Listen, I appreciate you saying that. Thanks for that. But I think this is more serious than that. Matter of fact, this is more serious than that." And his exact words were, "If you really want me to, I can write you a referral to a psychologist, and I can write you a script for medication. I really want you to." And he said, "Well, I can, but I honestly don't think you need it." And he went on to talk for another 5 minutes about why he didn't think I needed that. And, well, I can't really force his hand. I can't, outside of getting a solicitor or getting a lawyer and coming into him, there's very little I can do. So I left the office thinking, all right, look, maybe he was right. And look, looking back, I didn't end up getting a referral at that time, but it was about a year later. Medication either. So I'm not saying that either GP was wrong about their analysis, right? I certainly needed to do more socializing, and that was mental health. But I also left thinking, what is it about the way I described my experience that gave them the impression that I was, you know, and or how would I need to convince them to take my feedback more seriously than I felt like they were taking it. And so I got to thinking about, men a bit more generous and how we might present differently when we're in crisis versus women. And there's a little bit of research on here. Now, honestly, Dr. Bob, the research is a bit mixed, a bit variable. It's not something definitive yet, but I've seen studies that have said, look, men are more likely to display irritability or anger and mask that for the sadness and grief and the hurt that they're feeling. I've seen research that said men are more likely to experience anhedonia. Okay, that is lack of interest in one's pleasurable activities, as well as fatigue, right? So we're less likely to talk about the hurt, the sadness, and the grief, and we're much more to experience, mourning, fatigue, and we're much more likely to experience lack of pleasure in one's pleasurable activities, right? So this is what the research is showing about the gender difference in male presentation for depression. I also believe that because in those moments anyway, I wasn't looking like kind of the stereotypical client or person crying. But if you know me, then you know that I don't exactly, that might take a little bit more from me. I was actually reasoning my way through the experience. Not that I wasn't feeling sad. In those moments, I thought I want to explain what's happening for me, you know. And I wasn't feeling tearful right then. I was aware of my experience, but not feeling tearful. So I talked about, the grief that I was experiencing. I talked about some of these. So what's my point? My point is that in trying to make sense of my own experience, I began taking a look at, what happened for men generally when we experience mental health issues. And I also started to look at, what are the barriers to us seeking psychological service. And one of those barriers, I believe, and the research backs me up here, is that because with some of those signature features initially, we're less likely to be referred to a counselor or psychologist.
And first of all, I'd like to thank you for sharing your own personal challenge with this, but also your overcoming of it, which I really appreciate that. What are some of the common, I don't know if that's the right word, common causes, or some of the frequent causes either you've seen through your own research, others' research, or just your practice in this area? What are some of the causes of mental health challenges for men?
Mm. That's a really important question. Well, all right. So number one, the gender mental health problems in men are the same across genders to some degree. So when we experience, for example, the breaking up or a cessation of a relationship, that could be a friendship or romantic relationship, if there are professional issues, difficulties finding work, recently being like major transitions in life. Any major transition in life could potentially be a catalyst for a mental health crisis. For men, almost uniquely, when we begin to, because we often define our masculinity based on our ability to achieve, when we struggle with that, I believe it's more likely to send us into a mental health crisis. Now, part of the problem there is that narrow definition. What does it mean to be a man? To be a man means to be professionally successful. How ridiculous is that? But part of that, Dr. Bob, and you and I have talked about this before, is the indoctrination within patriarchal socialization says that men are valued to the extent that we are breadwinners, to the extent that we are financially stable. And if we don't have access to financial stability, then we're less than a man. Now, I want you to think about how this would uniquely affect, for example, African American men. One of the highest rates of unemployment, and I think the highest rate of unemployment within the U.S. is African Americans. So you're an African American male, and you've internalized the kind of traditional masculine norms, masculine values of what it means to be a man, and part of that is, well, to be a man means you're a breadwinner, right? You're a financial provider. You are financially or professionally successful. The economy's taken a beating. Unemployment within the community generally, within the U.S. generally is large, and so you struggle finding work. Then how's that going to impact your sense of self, right? Okay, so for black men, just like men in general, that kind of situation, difficulty finding employment, can send you into a mental health crisis, especially as you begin to question your own worth. What is my worth if I'm unable to provide financially? Just real quickly, I want to say, a really close mentor of mine, Dr. Jim Dobbins, through a correspondence, had, reminded me, Bill, keep in mind, ultimately said that your worth, no one's worth, should be, needs to be defined by their judgment. And I think his exact phrase was, my worth is not defined by being a psychologist. My worth is not defined by the work that I do. I just want to say, look, I know you've got questions, but I just want to say a bit more about this idea of men defining our worth by work. And I talked about it, part of it being the socialization, the buying into stereotypical, traditional masculine norms, right? Well, when we're raising boys, often the message we send to them is that, you are valid to the extent that you are doing something. You are engaged in some kind of activity. We're not saying you're valid just you're of who you are, just because you are a being, just because you are you, you are valued. You know, we're saying that no, to the extent that you're right. And so it's no wonder that as that boy, as we grow up, we really buy into that wholeheartedly. I'm not enough by myself. I'm not enough by myself. You know, I need to be actively engaged in some kind of profession, or I'm worthless. Right? And these ideas of worthless can undoubtedly, no question about it, increase emotional debilitation.
Well, you know what? I'm glad that you're covering it from stem to stern. I do have some conversation. No, it's your show, man. You're the expert, so I'm here learning, and the audience is here learning. I do have some conversation pieces though that I'd like you to address with the
Let's
way
talk.
with the way the economy is these days around the world, whether black, white, etc. How are men handling this economic shift where they're not the breadwinner anymore? And if they're not handling it, how can how can they how can they handle it better?
I think I heard most of that. So you're saying, how do we reconcile those two messages? On one hand, the economy's off, so it's tough finding work. On the other hand, we bought into the notion that we have work to the extent that we're working. Is that generally what I heard you say?
Yeah, basically, you had mentioned that, and because the economy around the world, and also not only for men of color, but a lot of men in general, have lost their work, lost their what they think is their value because they don't have work to define them. What do you say to those men on how to overcome that so they don't fall into a state of depression?
I really like that this conversation piece. Thank you for bringing this up. The first thing I would do is say nothing. The first thing I would do is listen to them, and very often at all, there's so many sources of talking at men. It's rare that we do what you're doing right now, which is just give men a space to talk about their experience, provide a platform to listen to them, to listen as they talk about whatever they're feeling, whether it's the anguish and frustration and despair and hope or excitement or doubt or fears, whatever it is. I would listen, and I would want to understand what it's like for men. I'd want to understand how an individual male or of males are feeling about this. So before I would pretend to advise them, I would want to I'd want to hear, and I'd want to try to understand their experience. And just to say a bit more about this, in some of the correspondence you and I have had, I talked about the fact that there aren't too many spaces or places which provide a platform for men to just talk about their experience. We don't listen to each other as men, and my personal take is that I believe it's really hard for women also to listen to men talk about their pain. I'm looking at I'm a reader, not just a writer, but a reader of articles, on the Good Men Project. And I was looking at an article, and I'm just looking at the author here, written by Mark Green, as he's talking about his correspondence with Joanna Schroeder, who Good Men
Yeah.
Project, and based on their correspondence, he came up with the question: You know, are men on one hand encouraged to be more in touch with our feelings, and then once we express those feelings, are we, you know, marginalized, excuse me, or ignored or avoided? And I responded quite directly to the article, to the tweet, and said, I believe that that does happen. I believe as men, we don't do a very good job listening to each other, share our pain, and I believe it's hard for women as well. Sometimes, you know, reading Bell Hooks and her wonderful book, The Will to Change, and in her book, she talks about, you know, it can be difficult, challenging for women, a heterosexist or heterosexual context, cross-gendered interaction. It can be difficult for women to listen to males disclosing their pain and frustration related to love, because women often feel responsible once they hear that. They feel like they're to blame because, again, in a sexist context, women are socialized to be bearers of love, to be loving, to be the bearers of connection. So once love fractures or once there's a disconnection, women may often feel responsible in a sexist context. So then it's difficult for women to hear that, to hear the pain and frustration that men feel surrounding love because they feel responsible. So then women may not listen to it. You know, I said that women don't listen to men, but I'm not trying to say that it's up to women to listen to us. We've got to be willing to listen to each other. An article I wrote on Good Men Project years ago about men and emotion, I shared this story I'm going to share with you right now. When I first moved to Australia, I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in the U.S., and he was saying, Bill, what's it like in Australia, you know? And look, I told him, I said, look, it's really good. I love it here, but it's also challenging. I said, look, I miss you, man, and I miss my family, and I miss my friends. I miss U.S. sports. I miss sunny Southern California. I miss talking slang with, you know, the brothers who I know, you know, and sometimes it gets lonely. And there was silence, and there was silence in his response, and there was more silence in his response. And then finally he said, yeah, but how those ladies treating you there? And and I thought, yeah, there it is. I expressed, you know, too much emotion, and the way that he chose to cope with that was by shifting the topic to dating and romance. Now, this is not, you know, I'm not having a go at him. I'm just saying that it's really difficult for us to listen to each other. He wasn't willing to sit with me in the space of pain I was in. It got difficult, and he chose to move the topic. And what did I hear? I heard, this is not a space, this is not a place to talk about my emotions, and maybe I shouldn't talk about them at all. So going back to your question, the first thing I would do would be to listen, and the first thing that I would suggest, if I would, you know, if someone said, look, I want your advice about this, I would ask us to re-examine that notion that worth means money, that worth means professional achievement. I would ask us to look at that again, and I would try to phrase it in this way. I might phrase it like, pick the closest person to you right now. You know, your children, your nephews, your nieces, your grandmother, your grandfather, your mother, your father, just the closest person to you, right? Now, let me ask you this question. If you didn't work, if you didn't have a job, would they still love you?
That's
Would they
powerful.
still, what's
That's
that?
that's powerful.
Right. So I would ask us to re-examine that idea that work equals money equals profession, and that's one of the ways that I would begin that discussion, that re-examination.
It's interesting you mentioned that. One of the things I ask men who are going through challenges, or just men in general, I ask them, "How's your heart?"
Hey,
And I don't mean the workout, bicep part, right?
you say more about that though.
Yeah, and you understand where I'm coming from with that question, because I don't think many men are asked about that heart.
Talk, talk about it.
They're not asked about that heart, because and I know that there are a lot of men out there that are screaming and nothing's coming out.
Ooh, you better talk about it, Dr. Vibe.
You know,
Talk about it.
and I usually I don't get involved in when guests or friends are on the show, but it's very important for me to share that there's just a lot of men that are screaming and nothing's coming out, and we need, and it's not easy, because
No.
most men are not raised to be open. They're not raised to share.
Mm.
We're raised to provide and protect. You know.
Talk. I mean,
Go ahead.
you couldn't be more right. You couldn't be more right about this. And when you say that most men are not raised to talk, I would agree that most men are not raised to talk about what's going on inside of us in terms of our emotions. And part of that is who's listening.
Yeah, exactly. And you make a very interesting point, doctor, because when a man shares this with a lady, first of all, most of them aren't used to that. Because and I'm not being negative here. It's of course it's always the most difficult to adapt to new things.
That's
So,
right.
and then the party that's listening may say, "Is he weak?
Mm.
I expect him to be strong." But one of the things I always like to share is every Superman has his kryptonite.
Talk. Talk. I mean, and here's the other part of that too, that we need to look at a different definition of strong. I
Yeah,
can't tell you how often I hear that strong means, well, I don't talk about emotions or I don't feel emotions. Not feeling emotions is terrifying, and I mean that in every sense of the word for a lot of reasons. Number one, not feeling emotions often indicates some level of numbness, especially when there's trauma that you've experienced. So there's unresolved trauma going on, and that can lead to the numbing of emotion. Uh, Here's the other thing that's scary about not feeling emotions. When you can't feel emotions, it's difficult to empathize with other people. So then it becomes easier to hurt other people, and certainly becomes easier to not be aware of when you have hurt someone else. Excuse me, just gonna grab some water here. I got way too excited.
no, wait, what do you mean way too excited? It's the Dr. Vibe show. It's your show, man.
So I would want to redefine strength, and I would say a few things about it. Number one, I try to tell one thing that's very important to me, and I try to say it out loud. It takes a lot of courage. I mean, only warriors come into counseling. Only warriors seek psychological counseling because it is hard work. It's hard to be a client. Look, it's difficult to be a therapist. It's hard work being a therapist. Being a psychologist is hard. But I got to tell you, Dr. Vibe, and I know my psychologist friends don't like that I'm going to say this, but as difficult as it is being a psychologist, it's more difficult to be a client. Okay, to acknowledge vulnerability, to acknowledge pain, to acknowledge secrets, to re-examine your behavioral patterns, to acknowledge what's not working, to acknowledge the behavior that you've engaged in that it's at least partially responsible for your current plight, to take responsibility for yourself. Oh my gosh, that's work. That's
It is,
challenging.
and it's a lifelong journey. It isn't resolved in a snap, because we have to realize it's taken so long for that to build up. And there's my hand in the screen, and it takes time. It's going to take that journey back. And I always like to say that, you know, yard by yard is hard, by inch it's a cinch. And I think a number of our men out there have to realize that it's okay. It's okay, but you got to make a start somewhere. I think a number of men, they know in their mind, doctor, that they need to change, but until it hits their heart, that's when they'll make a move. That's when they will come to see someone like you. That's when they'll come and ask or get someone to just say, can we talk?
Well, that's right. You know, that decision to come in also, I want to say, gets easier when you've got other people around you who are normalizing that experience, who are saying, look, people like you, Dr. Bob, who are saying, hey, look, life gets hard sometimes. That's not unique. Happens to everybody to some degree. Life is hard. Talk to someone. That's okay to talk to. Have a chat with someone. Absolutely. And I just want to make this clear that, you know, Mark Anthony Neal and Bell Hooks have both talked about our infatuation with the idea that strong means emotionally stoic, you know, and I think the way we're looking at that word is problematic. Strength is, you know, one indication of strength for me is you've gone through some difficult things and you're still gone through some difficult thing, or you know, strength is a function of the coping skills you're using that have assisted you with, you know, walking through the darkest of times. So strength isn't avoiding the darkness, avoiding the pain. It's as Jim Dobbins would say, strength is walking in the face of your fears. They're there. And that's normal to have fears. My gosh, it is normal to be afraid. Why is it, Dr. Bob, that, you know, certainly when I was growing up in St. Louis, and maybe the same for you when you were growing up, you know, when I was a young boy, one of the worst things you could have done was acknowledge being afraid. Matter of fact, no matter what was going on, you know, once you got with your friends and you all would talk about doing certain things, and somebody didn't want to do it, the first thing you say is what you're scared of. What you're scared of, you know. And maybe their response is, you know, I ain't scared, you know, as if there's something wrong with being afraid. As if, you know, fear is not just as I say, it's not just a four-letter word, you know. Fear, to be afraid to some degree, to have fears is to be human. To acknowledge those fears is to have insight, to be in touch with your humanity, to overcome those fears, or to, again, to walk in the face of your fears is a demonstration of strength.
Well, you know, one of the things I always like to share with men when it comes to mental health, I'm not perfect. I'm not a real doctor, but I've lived a little bit, and I've lived enough of other people's stories. Is that many men, we are raised that everything goes straight. And once it's like riding on a motorbike. If you've ridden on a motorbike before, and there's the lead driver and there's the person you're holding on, the person behind them's holding on to them. Sometimes that motorbike's going to go into a turn. And a lot of times, many men can't handle those turns of life. And that's what we have to realize, that if we have to realize that if we're not careful, life can kill you.
Of course, kill you as in. Say more about that.
I would say life can kill you emotionally, but then those emotionally can take even a bigger toll on your life. This is not an easy thing called life. If it was, everyone would be good at it. So we have to realize as men that we're human, we have our kryptonite. But the thing is, as I always like to share with people, it took two people for you to get in the world, unless you came from the stork, which I don't know anyone who came from a stork. So if that's the way you came into the world, that's maybe why way you should continue in the world. Knuckle up, buckle up is good, but sometimes when you have something not going right in your life,
Hmm.
man, first of all, do you turn to somebody, and who do you turn to? And I think
Well, that's it.
the big question is, do you turn to somebody?
Hmm.
I think that's the first step right there, is do you turn to somebody? And then who do you turn to? As you said, I'd even take it to another level. You had shared earlier with us, well, who loves you when you don't have a job? The next question is, who loves you, period?
Hmm. Right.
You know, and many men are not taught to love, true love, unconditional love. And we need to just realize, like one of the things I do every week, there's about 3 or 4 guys I call every week and just say, how you doing?
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, it's how you doing? Just, and we, believe it or not, we don't talk about sports. We talk about anything from world events to this and that. But do you have someone you can reach out to? You know, and for
Hmm.
me, I'm blessed with a lot of people like that. Even to my own father, who's still alive.
Hmm.
He's a man. I can reach out to him. He reaches out to me. We're not perfect. We have our challenges, but we know that when the chips are down, we got each other's back.
Well, that's it. Yeah, there you go.
And so like every relationships are the key to everything. That's just Dr. Vi's opinion. And the better relationships you have in life, the better life you will have, men.
Hmm. Well, I
Just
don't disagree with that.
just a thought, and it's not easy. And you know, about a few weeks ago, I had a gentleman on my show who was diagnosed with bipolar for 20 years,
Hmm.
and it was interesting. During the conversation, it was actually a documentary. One of the things that he found out was near the end of it, as he was overcoming, was a lot of it was rooted with his relationship with his dad at a younger age. And, and,
Hmm.
and we cannot reduce the significance on how much on a man's psyche his relationship with his father has on him every day of his life. Just a thought.
Well, I want to say I definitely agree with your take about the importance of relationships, no doubt. And the more, well, I should say, the better they are, then often the better you feel. I get squeamish when it comes to diagnosing because of our tendency to throw around diagnoses like we're like it's candy. But I will say that there's no doubt about it that the better your relationships, the better you feel, and that's across everything. That I mean, not just across cultures, but even if we're going, full blown hardcore, DSM-5 psychological diagnoses, and it doesn't matter what your symptoms are. The better your relationships, the better you'll feel. And you talked about how to love and men, understanding how to love other people. And, I like Lil Wayne. I like his song, How to Love. Now, in the song, he's actually talking about a female that he's having a discussion with, but I could easily say the same thing for men in that, never being shown or never understanding how to love. And the more that we, embrace connection and tenderness and reject hardcore Western style individualism, then I think the easier to become to demonstrate loving other people. I think you're right. There's a call out. I think yesterday by someone at the Good Men Project, and in the article or in the article, he asked, are there how are we doing in preparing men and boys for the future? I would say, well, one of the things that we're struggling is teaching men and boys, teaching each other how to love. Um, I talked before about Bell Hooks and her saying that women are stereotypically the bearers of connection, the bearers of love, whereas men, what's been instilled within us, ideas of dominance and control and individualism, disconnection, individuation, and all of these things that separate us from other people as if we live in a box. So again, if the question though, and this is important for me as well, is about, okay, so these are the issues that you and I have talked about, Dr. Vibe. Now what do we do?
Yeah. What's our solution?
I think the very first thing.
Go ahead.
I think the very first thing, or for me, is not providing advice, but it's number one, it's listening, and not just passively listening, but actively listening, actively demonstrating an interest, in who you are, not what you do, but in who you are, actively being interested, being curious about who you are, and then listening for the response. You talked about the importance of being yourself. I think it's important that we accept ourselves, and then we surround ourselves with people that are accepting of us. I'm a Jane Austen fan, who's Jane Austen, the author of movies. I'm watching I'm watching her movies, and I'm looking at the male characters, and I'm find myself feeling a great deal of empathy for them, and noticing that one of their issues with some of the characters anyway is this challenge to accept who they are and to surround themselves with people who do the same thing, who accept who they are. Not that we don't have flaws, not that we shouldn't grow and learn and progress and challenge ourselves. I believe these things are important aspects of life. But I think it's psychologically damning to surround ourselves with people who are frequently sending us a message of change, while not simultaneously sending us a message of love.
Well, you know what? One of the things is, as we wind down here, that I always suggest to people, especially to men, is it's a acronym, and there's an old song back in the day called OPP, and
Hey,
I say to people, only surround yourself with OQP, only quality people.
that's it. Talk about it now.
Yeah, only quality people, because I remember it's been said to me a number of times, I can see where you're at if I know the 5 closest people that you're with.
That's it.
And I think that's a very good stamp on where a man stands. And again, I'm just sharing from my heart the things I know, and they may be right, they may be wrong. I'm just sharing just a little bit of my life experience, and others share with me. But you know, with especially with men and mental health,
Yeah.
if you need help, reach out. If one person doesn't listen to you, find somebody else. Go till you find someone that listens with their head, and as the doctor said, with their heart. Very,
Talk.
very, very important. The head and the heart. And they may not look like you, but the most important thing to me, love is colorblind. True love
Talk.
is colorblind. And when you get that, because I've had different mentors of different colors, different shapes, different sizes, and it continues on. They keep me balanced. So when I have a
All
good
right.
day, I can celebrate with someone, or a number of people. When I have a bad day, I can celebrate also. And men don't didn't help you, because they have evaluated experience in
What
areas
was
that we don't have evaluated experience in.
I didn't get that very last part. I think
No,
you said say it again.
I was just saying that yes, we talk about men and mental health, and again, it's also good to reach out to them, because many women have some evaluated experience that a lot of us men don't have.
Oh, look, you can be more. My closest friend, like the closest person to me in Australia, Teresa is not a black male. She's a historically a Maltese ethnic but Australian white female, and the people that I've chosen to surround myself with here in Australia, I don't do it based on race, based on racial background. Look, I don't want to. Obviously, race exists, at least sociologically it exists. So I'm not saying that we live in a colorblind society. I'm saying I fully agree with you. The people that have meant the most to me here have not been black males. In Australia, I'm talking about,
Sure.
have not been black males. So I agree. It's about finding that space of validation, that space of support, and you never know where that could come from. You never know who that can come from. So I think it's a good idea to be open within yourself, to differences. Just being open, period.
Absolutely. Well, Doctor, as we come to the close of our conversation, it's been a great one. I've shared more than I thought I would, but you pulled it out, so that's good stuff. Do you have any closing thoughts on when it comes to masculinity and mental health? We're coming to the end of 2014. Where do you feel this subject stands, and where does it need to go?
There is something that I really want to mention here. It doesn't address your question, but I just want to say this. Because I know how popular your show is, so I know this comment will reach a lot of people. That I talked earlier about my own experience with depression. I was really, and I've been really blessed to have been fortunate enough to receive support, receive assistance, validation, understanding by people both in my family in the U.S. are mentors. We both know Joe White, Jim Dobbins, my mentor. People, Tom Parham, people in the U.S. Who I grew up with, my friend Phil, just different people that I've been blessed to have been around, and there have been people here in Australia. I mentioned a friend of mine. I'm just name dropping now, but this is important for me to say that I just cannot thank those people enough. Even though there are some people whose names I don't even know, who people I don't even talk to every day, that have been nothing but supportive for me. And I don't always do my due diligence and making sure that I shake hand and I thank every source of support. So I'm doing that through the Dr. Vibe show right now, that I just cannot thank those people enough for all of the support, all of the concern, all of the validation that they've shown to me. That's meant the world to me. No, I can't ever pay it back, but I want you all to know just how much I sincerely appreciate that.
Well, you know what? I think it's an important part of masculinity. Thanking the people that have helped you become a man and continue to grow as a man. So no problems.
Okay.
So before we leave, any last thoughts about masculinity and mental health as we come to an end of 2014?
The things that I'm still, look, I'll talk about me. The things that I'm still grappling with and trying to promote and trying to advance are, how can we as men teach each other, teach ourselves how to love ourselves and how to love other people. I said I'm writing a paper right now for Good Men Project about how we're not preparing boys for the future. Well, we're not teaching them how to love. And sometimes we're open enough that other people might love us or want to love us, but we're not teaching each other or ourselves how to love them. The other thing I want to advance is that I just want to reframe the idea of courage. That courage is asking for help. Hard stuff, I know, but I think much more progressive masculinity, as we continue to advance the idea that it's important for males to love other people, to practice loving ourselves and others, get into the practice of reaching out. Being courageous is about reaching out for assistance when we need.
Excellent. Well, on that point, we'll end our conversation. And thank you, Dr. Bill from Australia, Melbourne, sharing with us. And I don't know if we'll get the opportunity of having you back on the show before the end of the year, but a happy 2014 to you, and also a blessed and highly favored 2015. I know you will be back on the show again, if not before the end of the year, but certainly early in 2015. How can people connect with you?
On the show, so you can you catch me on Twitter at Dr. Bill 2012. As you mentioned, I'm also on the Good Project there. I've got a column. If you just look up the name, then my articles. So at Dr. Bill 2012 on Twitter, and I'm also at the Good Men Project.
Excellent. If you want to touch base with Dr. Vibe, that's me. You can the best way to catch me, just go to my website, the DRVIBESHOW, the drvibeshow.com. You can also catch me at the Good Men Project, the only online show that's featured on a regular basis at the Good Men Project. I'm also co-host of Man You Wanna Be monthly Google Hangouts with Marie Roker-Jones, and also you can catch selective shows at the Black Life Coaches Facebook fan page, the #1 resource for Black Life coaches in the world. As always, we like to say you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. God bless, peace be well, and keep the faith. Bye-bye.